Hey Bobcats, this is Mr. Peterson. Today we're going to be looking at the last little bit of lessons on factoring quadratics. And the first little bit here deals with projectiles, and then the next little bit deals with writing a function when you know the zeros already. Just so you know, there's not a special notes page for this, so if you'd like to keep notes, please do so on a separate sheet of paper. First of all, the idea of a projectile, you probably heard of the word projectile, maybe you don't know what it means. It's an object that's thrown or launched into the air. And in your advanced science classes, you'll use this formula a lot. This formula helps you approximate the height of a projectile on Earth after t seconds. And here you can kind of see what all the different parts of this function do. The negative 16 is a constant due to Earth's gravity in feet per second. V sub 0 is our is our initial vertical velocity when t equals 0. And then h sub 0 is our height when time equals 0. Now this function isn't perfect. It doesn't take into account air resistance or wind. But in general, it's one that we use a lot. And it's still applicable. So let's look at a problem. It says, a soccer ball is kicked from ground level at an initial vertical velocity of 32 feet per second. After how many seconds will the ball hit the ground again? Okay, so let's just look at a picture of this. So imagine that this is a soccer ball really quick. Soccer ball gets kicked, goes up in the air, comes back down to the ground. Kind of looks like a parabola. So that's one way that can kind of gives you a clue that this situation might be quadratic in nature, which is why the function applies to this. So let's recall that the function is h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus v sub 0 times t plus h sub 0. All right, and in this situation, they went ahead and told you that the initial vertical velocity was 32 feet per second. So in our function, we're going to have negative 16t squared plus 32 times t. And h sub 0, remember that's our initial height. When the ball gets kicked, it's at the ground level. So it's at height equals 0. So we're going to add 0 at the end. We want to know after how many seconds will the ball hit the ground again. And again, when will it be on the ground? That's height sub 0. So our answer will be when is it going to equal 0? All right, so this 0 here at the end, it doesn't really matter. It's going to go away. What we should probably look for here is, can we factor? And yes, we can factor. They both would have a common factor of t, and they both would have a common factor of a negative 16. So we're going to pull out a negative 16 from them, a negative 16t, excuse me, from both of them. And when we do that, we get a t, and then a minus, and then a 2. And remember, you can always go back and check this by distributing again and making sure that it looks back at like your original function. So now we have the two factors. We would know here that negative 16t equals 0, and that t minus 2, thinking ahead, t minus 2 equals 0. So we add 2 to both sides, t equals 2, and then we divide by negative 16, t equals 0. So our times are at 0 and at 2 when the ball is touching the ground. Which one of those we already knew. All right, so why don't you guys try this one? Okay, this is a little bit more straightforward. This one says write the quadratic function in standard form when you have zeros that are 2 and negative 1. When you have zeros that are 2 and negative 1. So this time they've given you the zeros and they say, okay, work back, give us the standard form of this. So remember what the zeros are. That's where we touch the x-axis. So in other words, that's where x is equal to 2 and where x is equal to negative 1. So remember, the way that we get these is we have to write an equation, set it equal to 0. So let's unwork that. Let's think about, okay, here it is in the very last step. Well, what would I have to have done to get it to that step? Well, I would have had to take away 2 from both sides. So x minus 2 is equal to 0. And then what I have to have done over here to get it to be -1? Well, I would have had to have added 1 to both sides. So x plus 1 is equal to 0. So now you have the two factors. You would take and multiply them back together. X minus 2, the quantity of, and times x plus 1. We want it to equal 0, so let's just FOIL this. We have x squared plus x, and then we have negative 2x minus 2 equals 0. Combine our like terms here. We have x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. So there is our one possible answer that could give us these two zeros. Remember, there's lots of different functions that would have these as zeros, but this is just one of them. Obviously, if we multiplied everything by 2, that would give us another function that would both have those two zeros. So that's why I said this is one possible one. All right, so why don't you try this one, and we'll see you in class.